Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dripping Hartnell. No, we still won't tell you why we're called that podcast. This week, I am your host, Jimmy Wolfe, and we are going to be discussing the war games in colour. But I am not alone. I am joined by the lovely Abby Louise,
Hello.
the ever charming Connor Chadwick,
Hello.
and that cheeky chappy himself, John N. Harper.
Hello.
So, War Games in Colour, obviously one of their most recent ones they've colorized. And because I suspect that it is going to be something that we are going to go into in depth, no doubt, I'm going to say now the master-sized elephant in the room. We are going to leave until the end of the discussion to go into that. So to begin with, I'm going to go around the room of Zoom and ask War Games in Colour, what did you think of it? Starting with Mr. Connor Chadwick.
Oh, hello. I very much enjoyed it. Arguably, I would say that it was the way that they did this one, despite obviously the length of the story being much, much longer than the original Daleks. I do actually prefer the way they did this one to the one they did the Daleks in color. I think the Daleks in color, whilst I still think it holds up and it has its merits, something felt like they, in in this second outing, something felt a little bit more refined about the process. Um, I also, when I was watching it, I was watching along with my copies of the War Games to see what they had cut out. So I do know what parts didn't make it at all, which was really really interesting. Like parts one and two stay in almost their entirety.
Mm.
And then we get half of part. Oh, no, I think we get a lot of part three as well. But then half of part four, and then five, six, and seven, and half of part eight just don't happen.
Yeah.
And so, in other words, it's a mixture of about a five-parter. Instead, they cut half of it out basically. But knowing, having watched the original War Games and knowing that they go back and forth a lot, and they're doing basically like a version of the chase in some manner, I think cutting that out worked to its advantage because it helped them get from point A to point B in one journey as opposed to three.
Yeah.
Like, but I still really enjoyed it. I think there were some issues with the music being a bit too loud at times, and I think they relied a little bit too much on new series music. But
Mm.
overall, I did actually enjoy it, and especially the ending sequence as well, where they introduced they did almost. I know we've been saying not to use the word remake because it was a recolorization, it was a colorization of sorts, but they did, bar the obvious retcon that we'll talk about later, they did
Mm.
make a new regeneration scene based off of who was it? It was the confession dial on YouTube's
Yes.
regeneration sequence.
Mm.
I thought, having watched the original on YouTube, I thought the way they did it was fantastic. And the way that they integrate, I love the music they use for that sequence as well. The little references to the theme tune, a little bit like a It's it was like, I always think back to that moment when you're watching Night of the Doctor and Paul McGann shows up and then
Yeah.
he begins to regenerate and you're like, oh my God, this is it. Because we never really saw two regenerate.
Mm.
And it was one of those moments for me. So yeah, I very much enjoyed it, yes.
Mm. Abatha, your thoughts?
I feel I really enjoy like the full version of War Games. So I feel like this was a bit of a shambles personally.
Oh.
I get why they did it. I get it. I do. But like the little quirky things very much were taken out. Like it sounds really stupid, like the sonic screwdriver and being like, "Oh, look, I'm an alien. Look, I can unscrew that screw in your gun without actually touching it. Look, ooh!" Like the little quirky two moments were kind of lost because of the edit. Um, I love the
Mm.
fact that I just like I do love the attention to detail with the colouring and stuff like that though, and all the
Mm.
sets look amazing. Like the rundown set that all the soldiers were sitting in when they were getting court-martialed. Like you didn't really see that too well with the black and white version, so I love the little details on that. Um,
Mm.
but I personally feel like it was a little bit clunky in the editing, but that's just moi. I also loved the changes in the regeneration scene. That was sweet.
Mm.
Yeah.
John,
Hello.
I caught you unawares. Your
No,
thoughts on the War Games in Colour?
I've got a gun pointed at me. Help! No, but basically, the War Games in Color. So I really, really liked it, especially for the first part. And I kind of have a bit of a mixture of both opinions here, like, or not both, but all the opinions that we've had so far, because the first part, the first like few acts where we have a lot of episodes 1 to 3, and then before it trails off, absolutely adored that bit. I really, really enjoyed those segments, like playing through because it felt true. And again, I think that's, I guess, the issue with a story that you love a lot, because I adore the original War Games. Like, this is the weird thing with me. When I was a kid, I watched the entire 10-parter in one go. And I sat there for 5 hours. And unlike how I reacted, to the Daleks original version, I actually adored every single second of it. And the thing is, I think it's, you mentioned how, Chad, as you mentioned about it being like the chase and stuff like that. I'd never seen the chase at the time, so it was new to me. And I think that's what sparks your love. It's always your first viewing of it that, sparks your love for that particular kind of storytelling. Like, if I were to go to watch the chase afterwards, which I eventually did, I do like the chase, but I don't love that as much as I would the War Games, considering the elements that I saw first there. And that's the beauty of Doctor Who. You can watch it all out of order. And I definitely did with Classic Who. But with the next part of the rest of the story beyond that, it got more choppy. And I still absolutely love the War Games in Colours, depiction of the visual world, because it's early moments of dark broodiness is what really makes me love that story. But then moving onwards with it constantly cutting through, my head is putting these scenes in it. I'm like, wait, where's that? What about this? What about this? What about this? And all those events that happen, your brain spends a lot of time kind of going, wait, where is it then? I think that is like the mild dangers of editor cutting down such a big story or a long story. Like, I could just imagine, like, if we had a copy of the Daleks master plan, what they do with a 90-minute cut of that, But I still do enjoy it. And again, like, to echo everyone's sentiments with the regeneration sequence, I absolutely adored that, because I've been watching that regeneration sequence on YouTube for quite a while now, because it came onto YouTube like about nearly a year ago, I think, like quite a while.
It's quite recent, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a really, really good piece. And I don't know if it was created specifically for the War Games and then released early without context, or if it was specifically made by a fan who is just incredibly good.
It was made by a fan.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely adore that depiction of the regeneration. And the thing is that with that version of it, I will always admire that YouTube copy that we have, because that feels very I don't know, it's obviously not this, they've kind of changed it slightly, because obviously the music's different, the shots are, it's in 4:3, stuff like that, and light changes, but yeah. And I also thought it was quite nice for new audiences with like the end where they show all like the modern doctors. I don't know about the photos they used, but with the photos of the modern doctors they use for the face of the doctor to be his future, I think that was quite interesting. And well, yeah, that's pretty much it.
See, I'm again rather like John. I'm a sort of mix between the two, because on the one hand, I really liked the War Games in Colour, and I do have to say, a lot of me when I was rewatching it, thinking it really does make you realise how much of the War Games in Colour is, at the risk of dividing opinion here, it is filler. You can get the War Games story across without a lot of the exposition. That being said, I also echo the sentiment that I think it's a shame that there are so many bits they cut out. For example, the sonic screwdriver. That's one of those things that they should have kept in there, because it's such an iconic moment in the history of the show. That's the first time, one of the first times, or one of the most surviving times that we've seen it. You really should have kept that in there. But at the same time, like I said, what they have cut down and what they did cut out, there was a lot of it that I feel wasn't necessary. but equally at the same time, there were elements of it which left it feeling slightly jarring in places where they would sort of suddenly be in one area and then they suddenly got into another place immediately without sort of any transition in between. And it wasn't like there was any sort of even time of day change. It was like they literally just gone from one to the other. And I know, like, you know, for example, towards the end of the story, I think it's meant to be Pancho Villa's character turns up, or the, you know, the Mexican gunslinger, whoever it's meant to be. He shows up and he's just there. He's just there as one of the captured soldiers, whereas actually in the full story, he's quite a substantial character, and he's got this whole, you know, this whole thing ruse where Jimi has to, you know, pretend to be someone he's not to convince him, and it's sort of this whole sort of subplot's been cut out of the story, and it's a bit of a shame that you sort of lose that because you miss bits and pieces of it. But then you've got things like, again, the regeneration sequence was absolutely fantastic. I really loved seeing that because it was great to finally have a regeneration sequence. And obviously, you know, Confession Dial, who did it on YouTube, they did an absolutely fantastic job. And it was all the small details as well. Like one of my favorite ones is the fact that when the Third Doctor lands, the console flicks between 1970 and 1980. And I didn't notice this until somebody pointed it out, but the error code on the TARDIS console is Mordrin spelt backwards, and the episode code for Mordrin Undead, which is obviously one of the most debated ones for the unit dating controversy. So I quite like that little sort of Easter egg that was in there. Obviously that was in their animation, their reconstruction of the regeneration, but I think it was really good to have that in there. I thought the inclusion of the Doctor's future faces in the ending trial scene was a little bit of an odd choice.
I wasn't 100% on board with that because a lot of it was because it was all promotional photos. I knew what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
It's like we've discussed, I think, before, Jimmy, which is that it would have been amazing to have seen like David Warner, who's the alternate Third Doctor on the Unbound series, and then also some of the other maybe front runners who were up for playing the Third Doctor at the time.
Yeah,
of course. There's the. I'm sorry, I'm going a bit lore heavy, but
no,
there's also the leader who is a debated Doctor incarnation from the Inferno universe.
Yeah, because I did this as an edit on Twitter myself, funny enough. Which has been very well received. It turns out a lot of people actually first. So I had David Warner as the Unbound Third Doctor. I had the leader from Inferno, who I believe in one of the expanded media novels, possibly one of the Virgin New Adventures, it is heavily implied that that's him, and he's the Inferno leader is the Doctor who chose the face of the thin incarnation he was offered. I then had Arabella Weir as the too young Doctor, who was the alternate Third Doctor in Doctor Who Big Finish's Unbound Exile.
Oh, was it that one where she was getting drunk at Tesco's?
Yeah, she was getting drunk at Tesco's. And then I also put in a image from, I think it's a film called The Seven Chairs, but it's Ron Moody, who was offered the role of the Third Doctor, turned it down, and he later regretted it. And for those who don't know, I'm sure I don't need to tell this to Abby, but obviously Ron Moody was Fagin in the Oliver musical. Absolutely fantastic actor. He definitely would have been a great choice for the Third Doctor, but I think
what you doing in my TARDIS?
They really missed the trick there. I think I get the reason why they put the future faces in. It was a kind of little nod, a little reference, and it was intended to be a fun thing that I think people took way too seriously. But at the end of the day, these are Doctor Who fans we're talking about. We're going to take things like that seriously.
Is here.
Yeah.
Casper is here.
Yes.
Oh.
What did you think of all the different Doctor Who faces showing up on the screen for the regeneration?
I like the fact that it had like updated graphics and like it looking like holograms instead of just pictures. I liked how they included all the other modern faces. Yeah, just
good.
linking to the future.
There we go.
No, you see, that's good. That's just the thing. We're all sat here talking as older fans who know the original and like the original. But at the end of the day, you've got target audience here, and they like it. So it works.
See,
it works either way.
CJ's you like two quite a bit, don't you?
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah.
So he quite enjoys the Patrick Troughton era anyway. So like he's probably the exception to most modern Who fans. But
It's
you
good.
enjoyed it, didn't you?
It's good. We
Yeah.
like to have younger opinions on the classic series. This is why we do this podcast, to get discussions like this.
But it's like we were saying in the last one when we did the dialects in colour, is it's for a modern audience. It's we've seen the originals. We have been privileged enough to see the originals, but like, but no, like it's there and it's been redesigned to be there for a modern audience. Hence why it's shortened. And it's more what you might call concise. It's meant to be reflecting a product of today rather than a product of then, and that
Very
is,
much so.
That is, I think, where my struggles really begin. But nonetheless, that's what I've always said is, even about the show now. If I see something in the show and I'm not a fan, then I will simply go, well, if the children like it, that's the point. They are like I was them once, and
Yes.
I know there are plenty of people who didn't like Russell's first era, and because they were like, it's not like this era. Whereas I loved it as a kid, so like I know that there's going to be differences, and that's why I always judge it upon if the children, the target audience, are unsure. Then I'm like, okay, then in that case, that was really a blunder. But it sounds like all of them have been received well anyway, so that's a good thing. It's just, I think these sort of things are are not only for the target audience, but also, as I say, for us old timers, for us to discuss and try and appreciate it in a new light, even if we do fight it.
Very much so. So we briefly talked about the mentioned about the music and things like that. And obviously, again, there are certain controversies to some of the music used, which we're going to come back to at the end. But what did you think of the inclusion generally of new series music included in a classic story? John, please start.
Tell me. Well, hello. So with new series music being introduced, obviously, again, we're going to keep the elephant-sized sheet of war later.
Yes.
But when it comes to the music for those particular scenes, I'm not giving my opinion yet. But with those particular scenes with the music, I think they technically did do this, but I think not enough, because they used specific stings from the modern era that obviously gave this particular effect, and then used only once a sting from the 70s for a particular character. And my personal thing with that is that they needed to balance it out more, because it's okay to put that music in if that's your intention, if that's a story you're going for, put that music in. And then also balance that out with music of the time, because obviously it's for modern audiences. But the thing is that the best thing to do for a modern audience is definitely push it in a direction where you can kind of make them go look back on it, see what you think, rather than trying to kind of hide it, if you know what I mean. And I know it does appear once, so I'm not saying that's what's happening, but I think a better balancing of new era, old era music would have probably fitted it better, I think.
Yeah.
That's what I think. That's actually it.
Fair enough. Abby, your thoughts on the music?
Right. So
here we go. Right, strap in, people.
Yeah, you go on your thoughts for the music. Go on.
I just like how they used a little bit of modern music and a little bit of classic music.
You like the mix?
Yeah.
I am music blind, people.
Fair enough.
Connor, you do not care about music.
No, I just can't hear it. I really struggle to hear music.
What do you mean? Okay.
Well, Connor, your thoughts on the music?
For me, it's a case of I liked those tracks anyway because they're nostalgic for me anyway.
Of course.
Especially the big track used for the big moment. But yes. I will say that particular track was overused a bit too much. But I can understand. It's a case of, for me, that with the sense of new series music being used, and by new series I mean 2005 onwards, I suppose you call that revival era now. You wouldn't necessarily call it new series anymore.
I would still call it a new series. I still call classic and new. You know, I'm not having any of this new season 1 faff.
Fair enough, but
To be fair, just to be clear, I like season 1. I just don't want to call it season 1.
yeah, me neither. But I would consider a lot of the music used whenever it was the new series music, it's more contextual than it is there for the scene. I think it is to like, for example, with when it's used for the big reveal, so to speak.
Yeah.
It is used 2 or 3 times in quick succession across a handful of scenes to really get across a point, shall we say, without trying to skirt around.
To make a reference.
Yes, exactly. To really, because it's obviously, and you know, I think people listening to this will know what it is anyway. So.
Yes.
But nonetheless, it's obviously trying to hint that something is now this, as opposed to this isn't what it used to be. Because there is obviously a slight retcon in this, or at least or a heavily implied one.
Yes.
But nonetheless, I liked, for example, the use of classic music that was also used in the same context to tell, for example, classic viewers or classic fans about this particular reveal as well.
Yes.
And by that I mean there was a certain theme used. There was a theme used during the Third Doctor's era for a particular villain.
For the same villain that was used for the same reference music point of the
exactly.
new series.
So they used both classic and new Who themes to get that across, which I thought, okay, in that case, that's a confirmation for me. It wasn't just villain, ho ho. It's wait, no, ho ho ho, villains, ho ho ho. But it was actually telling us that is the person. I can't recall any other new series.
I don't believe there was that I can
recall. There were little bits, for example, I know we didn't really talk about music in the Daleks in colour, but like there was a little bit of new series music used there, but that was more for respite after.
Yes.
But most of it has been newly composed music by, I know Mark Ayres is one of them, but I can't recall. I know there's a second person, and I feel really bad. But no, I know that. It's sorry, Tristram Carey and Mark Ayres. But nonetheless, they have made tracks that relate more to that era, which has also been just as fun. Like when they did the little montage when the army medical van drives through the fog and ends up in a different place. There were little musical cues for that were never there before. And or like when the original I think it was the original part 1 cliffhanger. Was it part? No, it might have been part 2. Sorry, when all the Romans and everyone's running at them when they go through the time barrier. There was a bit of music there as well, which wasn't there as well because they had to have the original theme come in. So there are some really nice elements of music used that reflect the era, which is what we talked about previously about merging the CGI. Like I love the fact that when the Second Doctor is spinning away, we cut to a model Troughton TARDIS spinning through space.
Yeah,
that is a brand new shot. And it's topical for its time. It's timely. It's not. It's contemporary for what it is from.
I have to say, I loved the model work. I'm a big fan of using miniatures and models, and they really just did some absolutely fantastic stuff.
But then the outside of the War Chief's kind of domain, that was CGI, wasn't it?
That was a model. That was a model.
Was it?
Yeah. I can't remember who it was, but they posted it on their Twitter.
What was the model?
Yeah. The exterior of like the Warlord's base, that was a model with tiny little miniature planes. I can't remember who it was. Yeah.
What that dome?
That dome. That was a miniature model.
I honestly thought that whole thing was CGI.
I thought that was CGI.
No, that was a miniature model. I cannot remember. I posted it. Bear with me a minute while I'm checking out.
Oh, no.
It was like I retweeted it. No, I retweeted it. So I want to find out who it is because I really do want to credit them because it was absolutely.
That was going to be my
phenomenal.
one criticism because all the model shots were lovely, but that one kind of threw me off. It felt too new.
Well,
it was a model shot.
Whilst Jimmy looks it up, I will quickly bring this up because there were some discussion about this at the Gallifrey establishing shots, which I was very grateful for because I needed them for a trailer at one point. But like they had some brand new establishing shots where you were going over rocky terrain to reveal the citadel. Obviously,
Yeah, yeah,
I think the only one that was reused was from the end of Heaven Sent, when it
yeah. The
stands up.
turnaround build, yeah,
Yeah,
the
and I think
turnaround.
I'm pretty sure they rotoscoped the child running out because
Yeah,
there's a
Yeah.
child running down the path. But that's the only reused shot. But everything else was new, and I loved those new shots. Adored them. However, um, a lot of people said that they contrasted too harshly to the trial because they were brand new shots, and naturally, Gallifrey
mm,
is not exactly a model. Although I could believe to an extent that those rocks from those and everything from those new establishing shots were also models, but
yeah.
the way the Citadel looks, it doesn't line up or really properly match to the to the to the trial. So,
So I believe the
mm,
Citadel shots were used from Hellbent, but I found it so it was Rich Tipple was the one that posted it on Twitter. So
hmm
I've just put it into our you won't be able to see this people, but I've just put it into our chat here on the Zoom if you want to look. There's some actual model shots of the dome work in progress. Um,
Ooh.
absolutely sterling model work. As I said, I'm a big fan of miniatures and models and things like that. So really
oh
full
wow,
credit to him and everything. It really does just look amazing because I know the again the Doctor's TARDIS and the side rat spinning through space as well was a model shot. Um,
mm,
just absolutely fantastic sterling work from all of them.
yeah,
So going back to the music, sorry if I may for a minute as well.
of course,
Um,
yes,
so obviously putting aside the obvious choice of music, which again we will come back to, I have to say the piece of music they chose for obviously that grand reveal. So when the Doctor sees the War Chief for the first time, obviously in the original that's a silent scene. But I have to say, obviously, the piece of music they used, whilst controversial, the way that the bit they chose, so it builds up and you get it sort of builds to a crescendo, the way that music fits the scene, I absolutely love that because I said in the original, they make eye contact and it's silence and then they do the run. In the
mm,
new one, it really adds to the action and tension of that scene. I think if you could have picked any other piece of music with that same crescendo and it still would have worked as well. And I think it's actually I actually think, although it is rather loud at times, the way that they've incorporated the new series music to fit the action on screen works well. Obviously, the implications behind that music, I have other thoughts on, but you get what I mean about it. It really does sort of add to the tension of it. It's like we were saying in the Daleks in Color, where you have these sort of bits but they've tried to make these things look like action sequences by the use of music, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think the War Games in Color, they really made it work with the music. It really elevated those action scenes. What was already an action scene has been elevated higher
mm,
because of the inclusion of that sort of much more modern music.
Mm.
yeah, 100%. I agree.
Mm.
Hmm. And so regarding that, also this because this will lead into the music as well.
Yes.
The trial music was really good. But that obviously
Mm.
that links into my point about the whole
Yes.
the whole trial elements anyway.
Mm.
Um, but what because they had a bit of a Doctor Who theme build up for
Mm.
the trial, like when Jamie and Zoe were sent away. And then he goes, "Come on, we
Mm.
must continue with your trial." There's a little bit of a hooey element there, which I always like. I always like when big moments are happening and a bit of the theme makes it into it.
Yeah. It's the
Mm.
small details like that that really,
Mm.
again, elevate it, and make a big
Mm.
difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But speaking of, because I know I spoke about it a bit, what do you all think on the points that have been made by some of the viewers that the Gallifrey transitional shots
Hmm.
do not match the footage from trial? It looks too stark a difference, like it doesn't blend in well enough. What are your
I
feelings on that?
I think it's a very good point, just
Mm.
purely because the the establishing shots of Gallifrey, they look wonderful, and obviously it's great to see Gallifrey, but it is very clear that that is a new series shot being dropped into a classic series episode. And I think even if you'd put a film grain on the Gallifrey shots, um, it still wouldn't have looked right. And I think the only thing that I think would have really made it a difference is I can understand that they may not have been able to do this for reasons of budget, but as I said, we talked earlier about, you had the model shot of the base and they've used other model shots. I really wish they had made a model shot of Gallifrey.
That is exactly what Casper was just about to say.
And it's something that they could have done really, really well, because you really could have made Gallifrey look similar, but you could have given it a slight sort of different tilt to it. You could have made it look like it was still growing and still becoming something else, as if it was growing as it would have done with the new series.
Yeah, just didn't really fit with like all the old-fashioned techniques. Or shot of Gallifrey.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think it wasn't. Well, that's the thing. During this episode, Gallifrey the name didn't exist yet. So
no,
I think that's why, because in the War Games it was made. The Time Lords you were just on their planet. You had zero reference. You only saw these main, like, 3 or 4. I think you saw more than 4 Time Lords when they were just people. I think there was a quick cutaway to them working on the TARDIS between.
Yeah.
But, like, apart from that, they were silent and didn't say anything. And you only had these 3 judges to go with, and that's all you had to represent. And look at how much power they had. I think the reason why it changes is because you're kind of putting, like, you're giving a lot of context in the War Games, where the War Games had none originally.
Definitely, it does add a lot of layering to Gallifrey.
Massive collars and curtains.
Yes.
So like the old-fashioned Time Lords, what they wore. It's all good. What they wore was completely different to what the ones with the Fourth Doctor wore. They were just wearing the black and white robes and not the Nan's curtains with a big collar.
Which is interesting, given the fact that that's translated quite a lot into Big Finish more and other things more than the big collars have.
But that's the thing as well. I've seen a lot of fan creations where they modernize scenes or do their own art or anything of classic Gallifrey and the technology there, and that looks like it seamlessly blends in. Whereas here, the footage was just recolored, and I say recolored. It was colorized, and yet those cutaway shots to Gallifrey really made it feel like I was watching 2 different things. Like I think I think a model would have helped, definitely. Though.
Yeah.
I've actually got a question. It's slightly off topic, but you mentioned Jimi earlier, and like when they say goodbye. And before I go on to this, I want to say, like, I'll never not be upset when I see them say goodbye to each other, because I think Tu and Jimi I adore them together. I absolutely adore them together. The relationship that Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines had behind the set must have been ecstatic, because I genuinely love that duo. It's a perfect duo. And, the little references in Tooth and Claw when David Tennant with the Scottish accent, pretends to be James McCrimmon. That's always the kind of references I love in the show, But what I wanted to ask is, with the War Games in colour, and obviously us seeing the regeneration and all of that, the one thing that I want to say is it now takes away the mystery of what happened to the second Doctor beyond War Games.
Season 6B.
Exactly. That's the thing.
Does it, though? Does it?
This is the thing. I think there's still enough.
You don't see him land in a chair. It just cuts to him in a chair.
Yeah. There's still enough of a gap. It's narrowed the gap, I would say, but I don't think it has closed it, because you could all go.
As a person who isn't a big fan of the whole 6B thing, I prefer if it's not.
No, fair enough.
Why? Out of curiosity, why?
I don't know. I just feel like they forced him to regenerate. So where is the logic of them forcing him to regenerate and
Well,
then him toddling around? Even though, if you listen to the latest Pack Gang, yeah, yeah.
well, this is
Yeah.
the thing. You really won't, because I finished listening to Zygon Century today. You really won't like him in that then.
Oh no.
I mean, the thing is the reason I like the theory is that with Patrick Troughton returning for both the 20th anniversary and the Two Doctors, the second Doctor knows about Jamie and like he and Zoe
It's
having their memory delayed.
yeah, it's an attempt by the fans to recorrect continuity errors made by previous showrunners who didn't bother to check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I understand why.
that's how you can notice in those elements when you could see the show was going downhill, which is why I comment on the fact that having accuracy in these colorizations and to an extent slight re-edits
Yeah.
is so important. And when I'm glad they're keeping to that standard because it shows that there is still care within the show.
Yeah. I think when it comes to the regeneration scene, I genuinely think that we could have had all that regeneration scene, but this is all they had to do to kind of let the season 6B theory, perpetuate, because just grey his hair slightly. You don't have to do much, just grey his hair slightly. It's not because the thing is that we don't know. You could say it as two things. The second Doctor found himself spinning, and through whatever they did to him to force him to regenerate, you could say A, season 6B theory, or B, the way that they force him to regenerate is to force him to age. Rather than just killing him, they forced his regeneration through aging him. You could say either as a reasoning, because whatever you want to believe is your is yours. That's what I think is good about that, and I adore the season 6B theory only because with the second Doctor and Jamie and the Two Doctors, Fraser Hines and Patrick Troughton look visibly older. I think Patrick Troughton might have dyed his hair for the Five Doctors, but when you see him in the Two Doctors, one, it looks like time has passed. There's a gravitas to their relationship, and two, the console is different. Three, they obviously mention I don't know if it's Victoria or Zoe, but they mention someone, and it's the kind of things like, well, who's to stop him from going back and stuff like that, and meeting them. And it's one of those things where it's one of those things where it just completes it a little bit, It just completes it. It's not asking for much. Just grey his hair slightly. That's literally it.
See, the most compelling theory that I've seen so far as to how season 6B still fits in is right after the Doctor is given his choices of faces, and then he starts to say about people attach a great deal of importance, and he sort of starts to distort slightly. Somebody said at that point, the reason he starts to distort isn't because he's changing, but at that point, or he's started changing, at that point, he's snatched out of time. Season 6B happens. Possibly the Polystyle Publications comics, if you also go down that route. At which point, whatever happens at the end of that, he starts to regenerate and he is put back into time. Because one of the interesting things. So I don't know anyone listening who's read the Target storybook which we had, but there's a story in that called "Save Yourself," which actually takes place directly after the War Games. It shows in this particular story's continuity, the warlord has survived, and the Doctor, the second Doctor, is actually taken out of his trial, sent off to defeat him, and then obviously put back into his trial, and the regeneration continues. So far there is still a gap between either when he gets into the TARDIS and hasn't quite regenerated yet, or possibly before he actually starts regenerating and you put season 6B in there. Either way, I said it's closed the gap, but there's still enough place to put it in there, I think.
Yeah. My little headcanon is if 6B happened, those flashes of memory that we see.
Yes.
That is him having his memory maybe even erased of those missions. And him waking up going, "Where am I?" and thinking it's just after the trial.
Yeah.
It could still be you could easily explain it that they just, take him out of time, he ages for a certain amount of time, does all these missions with whoever, then they just de-age him and throw him in. Because that's the thing with the Time Lords, this will go back to the whole thing we were talking about with the Gallifrey shots and the Time Lords. They are so imposing, they are all powerful, and they are the gods of creation in the eyes of the audience. Because they are so powerful. Because the thing is, you juxtapose that with like Hellbent when the 12th Doctor just runs off, and they just don't go after him, and they just don't seem to be able to get him. But then it's the difference of that between the Time Lords being all-seeing, all-powerful. The Doctor and Jimi are all, they're all running to the TARDIS, and they're desperate, and the Doctor is desperate. But no matter what he does, they've got him. And that's the thing that I adore of the Time Lords, because I like to think that there are different sides to them. I like my little theory. I mean, it's because I've been reading some of the '90s books. Is like the powerful ones are usually the ones with a lot of information, but they still don't know everything, and they're all powerful, but not all Time Lords understand the power of their own race. And that's what I believe. That's the way. Well, that's my fan theory of how to explain why sometimes the Time Lords are depicted as quite bumbling and a bit idiotic, and then almighty gods who can see over the entirety of creation. You know what I mean?
Well, it's because they removed the emotional side, so thus they struggle to understand very core things. That's why in the classic era, having a human companion on Gallifrey was always key to show up the Time Lords, because they would somehow, because of their emotions, the human companion would have more of a logical response than the Time Lords, who obviously have to think very emotionally very emotionlessly about things. So because I agree with you, there are times where you sit there and go, why are the Time Lords just being made fun of, or how they thick sometimes. They're clever, but it's about where you have your intelligence. You can be emotionally clever, or you can be, intellectually clever, but somewhere along the lines, sadly, in life, there's always going to be one or the other you don't have.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I think the greatest, it's kind of a bit of an echo of humanity, if I'm honest with you, because I think the greatest issues with some Time Lords is their pride. Like, for example, Romana, her pride is her intelligence. She like the first line she says to the Fourth Doctor is literally like boasting about how good she got in her exams compared to the Doctor. But then, we obviously love the Doctor, and we know of the Doctor, and we know what he fights for, and therefore we consider him one of the best of the Time Lords. Doesn't mean he's the cleverest, but the thing is that they obviously judge by merit on Gallifrey, and it's mentioned like that kind of ideology is mentioned a lot, and it's good for children because that's what your life is judged on when you're a child and you're in school and stuff like that. You're judged by the merit of your exam, and I think that's a good comparison there, because it's the same thing with when I can't remember what Time Lord it is. I think it might be Braxiatel, I don't know, but it's a Time Lord who meets the Third Doctor, and then obviously the Master is on the planet, and it says his degree in science was better than yours, instigating insecurity. Time Lords seem to be prided on their ability, merit, and intelligence, and it's that kind of thing where the Doctor, even the Doctor himself, like with Midnight, when everyone's asking him like, how did you know what to do, it's because I'm clever, and he'll never be able to shake that like sense of intelligence because that's what they're brought up on.
That's the thing, he's brought up on. I have credibility. Like Time Lords are always like that. I have credibility because I know more. And sadly, when he's backed into a corner, like I know we're now suddenly moving on to Midnight, but I did actually watch that recently. But no, but like notice how when he's suddenly being questioned and shouted at, and he can't get a word in edgeways, he just shouts what he knows, and that's what he was brought up on. Intelligence gives you power.
The pride of the all-knowing eye, that kind of thing.
I do also think that to an extent that, even though the Doctor says he doesn't like knowing, or he doesn't like not knowing, I think he does. I think there's an element of learning that has always been ingrained in the show. Even though the show doesn't, even though this is why I know that controversially, why I quite liked Chibnall's era, especially the historicals, because even though the Doctor was knowledgeable at that point of Earth's history, you would still get to learn things. And that's why what I've always enjoyed about the classic series is that there has always been an educational element, like the war games. God, you learn about every war in that story. You learn about it, and it all felt, and it gave off the right message, which was it all felt useless because it was just people killing people. And that was, and that's the thing. And people say Doctor Who was never political. Like it was all just because you see it now more than ever, because it's all.
There was always an allegory for politics. I think that was the thing.
Well, Doctor Who enables you to go back in time and go forwards in time, which is like with regards to the war games, you're going back in time and you're seeing almost a copy of the same war. It's the same thing. Two people had an argument and decided, oh, right, we'll just destroy one another using other people's lives. Like it's there. Like it's always the same thing. And that's what I think the war games really gets across. And I'm glad that that allegory was able to stay in the colorized version as well, where it was just where they were in a way as well, which I don't know if this is probably me looking into it. When they went through the fog, they then realized that they're actually in a very similar area, just without the mud or the mucky mud. And then it's actually 1,000 years earlier, and it's just a different war or a different battle, but it looks the same except for the technology. It would have been interesting if they did one from the future to show how little things have changed, because I always enjoy that. Like, I know we're going into other territories of other allegories, but like I always like this idea with Dot and Bubble, because Russell T Davies said he was always being talked to when the casting of Ncuti Gatwa came along. Or what are you going to do when the Doctor goes back in time? Well, he's going to face such racism, and Russell went, he still would now. So that's why he set Dot and Bubble in the future, to show that things it is now, it is still to come, it will always be there. And that's the thing, what I've always enjoyed about the allegories of Doctor Who in terms of how it uses its political messaging. But people always refer to that clip of the third Doctor shouting at that man when he goes, I work for, Britain for Britain, I work for Britain. He goes, I have a duty to my country, and he goes, and not to the world. And I think it is actually about a solar climate agreement from Day of the Daleks, I think.
Yeah. Okay. If I can rein it back in from the politics slightly.
also, just as an honourable mention before I get stopped, Inferno. Anyway, carry
on. Yeah. So if I can rein it back, does anyone else have any other things to say before we get on to the big point? Does anyone have any further insight into the War Games in colour?
I do not know.
No. Although I do have a lot to talk about the next thing, but not anything else.
My only words are yippee.
Very good.
Okay, so that is our discussion of the War Games in colour. Thank you for listening. If you care to stick around, we are now going to discuss the correlation or not between the War Chief and the Master. Now, before we really get into this, I would just like to make a point that there is no wrong or right opinion here. There was nothing explicitly confirmed on screen in the War Games of Colour. That does not mean that a theory that he is or is not is any more right or wrong than the other. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I'm saying this because I realise how much of a divisive point this is. So I'm going to go around the room of Zoom once again. Abby, is the War Chief the Master?
So I like the idea. However,
the original writer did not say whatsoever that the War Chief was the Master, but now he is for some reason.
Fair point.
There we go.
I like this.
I trained the Padawan well. But no, I quite like the concept, because when you look at the way the Doctor speaks to him and the way they interact, it does kind of scream Master.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but
Master.
Mr. Chadwick, is he the Master? Is he not?
It's difficult. I'm accepting of him being the Master. However, there are some key elements that contradict still. Even though it has been heavily referenced via music, when you have that music accompanied with, especially the scene when when the second Doctor and the War Chief are talking about how they know one another, you immediately, with that music leading it in, you're like, yeah, this is totally them. But the one thing that puts it into doubt for me is the fact that this character wanted to create, as he worded it, galactic peace.
Ooh.
Now,
good point.
you could word that as, oh, that's the Master's version of peace, which is him in control. Because I think there was even a sly reference to the fact that the War Chief intended to take over from the Warlord, which is a very Master thing to do. Obviously, as Casper just referenced, the original writer had no intention for this, but other works from the show, like such as the expanded media via novelizations and via Big Finish, have changed lore in the past. So I think it is a difficult argument at times to say it, because when other books make the reference, and for example, the War Chief was just called the War Chief, they were then attributed the name Magnus at a later date, as far as I'm aware.
Yes.
So things can be added to it. Why can't things be changed is the argument I'd make. But I'm happy to go with either. I think they both have their own merits. I am excited more about the idea of it being the Master, because it's obviously, at first I was, because it's the Master in the Second Doctor era. And a lot of people were thinking that's why Delgado's Master is a lot more brutish with the Doctor. But it's a very complicated one. I used to have my opinion that I believed it was the Master, but now that I watch scenes, I see both in a way. I can accept both. It's a complicated one, but I'll stop rambling and going around in circles and I'll let John speak now.
Yes, John, is he the Master? Is he not? Your opinions.
Well, so my opinion is, before I actually talk about the opinion side of it, can I tell you my theory of why they've decided to do this?
Okay.
So this is my theory, so it could be complete rubbish. So if the BBC are watching this, you might be laughing at me. But the thing is that I genuinely think...
if the BBC are watching this and you decide to steal John's idea, you owe us copyright.
Oh, yeah. I expect a £1.6 million check in the next 24 hours.
That's never happening.
Anyway, your theory, sir.
So basically, I think the reason they've done this with the War Chief is that the Master in the modern series so far, as we've seen them grow across, I'd say Saxon, Missy, and Sacha Dhawan's Master, I would say is what the War Chief was. The Master, in terms of their character, has become the War Chief. And the reason I say that, my theory, is that you've got Missy's redemption arc and the constant desire to prove how similar they are. And also, you've got like Sacha Dhawan's desire, like, I am the Doctor, please let me be the Doctor because I am tired of being me. And you even mentioned it where like Chad is the third Doctor and the Master, like the Master's a lot more brutish, and it's sort of come out of nowhere. It's like, why does he care so much? Like, why specifically this planet? If the Master wants to do X, Y, Z, he could go somewhere else. And there's obviously that tie, that old, like, that history there. And the thing is that when you mentioned galactic peace, that immediately set it off in my head, because I'm like, well, the War Chief is trying to get all this power because his dark desire is like the desire that he has that's shrouded in the dark is that he wants control, he wants power for whatever reason, through like if you like the Koshi and like that kind of world of the Doctor and the Master, then I'm sure there are people who will know that the Doctor may, I don't know which book it's confirmed or where it is, but I'm pretty sure I've heard of something about like the Doctor killing someone for the Master, something like that. But basically, their long relationship. And the thing is, the War Chief as a character, through all the conversations they have, is what the Master became throughout the new series. With like it's the idea the Master started wanting to be good. And Sacha Dhawan obviously came in and changed that up, but with a different desire, with a slight... It's the same idea, just flipped slightly. You've got the idea for the Missy to be good like the Doctor, then Sacha's Master to be more like, I am the Doctor, I can be you, and I can do it my way. And I will ruin your legacy because I want to be known for that. Because, it's that kind of thing. But the thing is that I genuinely think that they've gone back and changed the War Chief's, original thing, because the fan theory was, up there, and also it mirrors what the Master has become now. And that's what I think. Not entirely. Obviously, there are lots of scenes like Sacha Dhawan's like quite bloodthirsty. There's not an idea of galactic peace, and that idea's been thrown out the window. But then we also have to realize that the Master in the modern series was resurrected into a time war, then turned himself human out of fear. And that can mess you up. That's traumatizing. So, and the thing is, imagine if you had the power of what some civilizations would consider to be a god, and the Earth was destroyed, and you had to go somewhere else. Eventually, you'd start thinking that if you developed a complex, you'd probably start thinking you could own the universe because you've got no one to stop you. That kind of thing. So that's where the Masters come from it. Whereas the idea of galactic peace, I assume the War Chief, if he is the Master, would be held slightly by the morals of his people, because even a bad person are still going to hold on to some good, you know what I mean? And it's that kind of thing, because no one is wholly bad or wholly good. There's no it's not black and white like good and evil. It's a mixture of all. And I think that's what contrast, that's the contrast I'm talking about with the Master and the War Chief, the Master of the modern series and the War Chief of old, which sounds like that was very poetic, but ignore me. But the thing is that with the Masters, got slowly, growing good parts, I think that's what could prove the most about how the War Chief, because, you were talking about cycles, or I don't know who talked about cycles, but cycles is where I'm going, is that the Master is in a cyclical pattern, constantly going through traumatic events, which triggers this desire to control everything around them, only to come to the regret and the idea that, no, I want this control to do good, changing the mind, but then something else happens constantly. It's like, Missy goes through a massive redemption arc, then a trigger comes in, finding out the Doctor's this important character, and then immediately spiraling again before changing, it changes them. And I think that's what works for the War Chief being the Master. But then I also think, it's dependent on how you want to view the character. Because when I first watched it, I was quite charmed by the idea of the War Chief being the Master, and then I spent a couple of weeks in turmoil thinking, well, how does that work? But this is the best way I could explain it: is that the Master is stuck in a cycle of his own self, because the Master lives quite a horrific life. And it wouldn't surprise me if, given the events of what happened to the Master, or the War Chief, what happened to the War Chief, it wouldn't, in this particular story, the War Games in Colour, would not surprise me if that is what spurs on this sense of rage and ownership. And then the more bad deeds he does, the more sins he commits, the more punishment he gets. And that sends him into psychopathy. He goes mad and crazy and angry. And then suddenly other events are happening, the Time War, all these things, and it's a spiraling chaos. And that's where that's jealousy, There's that kind of thing. So you can explain it in all ways. For me, I am kind of, for my opinion, I'm in both worlds. I'm both in the world of, yeah, he's the Master, and I'm also in the world of, well, there are pieces of media in the expanded universe which say he's not, and I like those pieces of media. Everything is canon, because, I think one of the best lines in the recent series is the Toymaker says, I made a puzzle box out of your history. Boom, explanation. Everything is canon. That is why Toymaker did it. And that's what I love,
Fair. That's fair.
Yeah, and I love that, And does it annoy me sometimes that things don't line up straight? Yes, because I'll sit there thinking that isn't right. But then you kind of go, oh, well, timey-wimey, we don't judge the enemy of the world for the fact that it depicts 2018 as a retrofuturistic world and there's a dictator like, Salazar, Salamander, not Salazar Slytherin. It's not Harry Potter. But, it's like we don't judge it for that because of its products of its time. But then obviously in your head, you're thinking, well, that's not what 2018 looks like. But from the eyes of the 1960s, that is what 2018 is. And I like to imagine that in the Doctor's head, through his memories, he's constantly seeing all of his memories change. If he looks at a TV, he'll see it as what it is at the time. And then his memory will change constantly. It will be, a flat screen TV, a plasma screen, a hologram. It'll be CRT. It will constantly change in the Doctor's memories. And that's how I imagine this. So if you want to believe in the War Chief being the Master, you can. If you don't want to, you can. It's entirely based on choice because everything is canon. That was a lot. Sorry.
I just want to ask. You prefaced before you started that you've only just had this thought, and that was 7 minutes.
Well, that's the thing. All it takes is a few things to set me off, because all these opinions are all jumbled around. All it takes is a specific phrase to put them all together. Because I've had these thoughts for a while.
What are you, the Winter Soldier?
So
it takes a few phrases to activate me.
So I personally, I seem to be in the minority here. I personally don't think he's the master. Purely because it's not that I'm wholly against it. But I feel that it makes I'm intrigued by the war chief, and I'm intrigued by some of the ways that he's appeared and other stories that he's appeared in. And I feel that by making him the master, you're making him just basically another fairly generic, boring villain. And I feel that he's got a lot more potential to offer as a wholly separate character.
That's why I find myself undecided, because I love the idea of there being a second Doctor and Master meeting. Even though we've heard it on Big Finish, it's different to see it live action.
The thing that I really
I completely agree. But I do completely agree with you in the sense of having it be another Time Lord who has connections to the Doctor. Only, if anything, his character serves as a setup for the Master, because you have the War Chief in the second Doctor's final story, and then what was it? It was in Pertwee's era that we then see the Master. And you already know, is that the War Chief? No, it's a different guy, but it's like a guy like the War Chief. He knew the Doctor as well. It just adds to it. So I get the merits of both. I think over time, I think I do still treat them as two entities. But I'm not against people having those theories, because
no, absolutely.
It was always a fan theory, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's very much each to their own, and I think for me personally, the music used in the War Games in Colour is a reference to the theory, nothing more. That's my opinion. I think they've used that music as a reference to it, and that's all it is. There's nothing explicitly said on screen. I personally don't feel like a music cue is explicit confirmation. And it's also the other thing, like I said, it makes him quite a generic, boring villain if he's just another master. But also, now, he's a very underused. He's not appeared in many things. He's only appeared in a handful of expanded media. So I don't know if maybe there are character rights issues that have prevented him from appearing in anything else. But I have to say, I think the one thing that the reason I would like him to be separate from the Master, because I think it's a trick that Big Finish especially have missed, is obviously we've had the War Doctor, we've had the War Master. How can you not put the War Chief in the Time War? It's the perfect place for that character. And I don't want him to be the Master for that reason, because I love Derek Jacobi's War Master. It's one of my favorite Big Finish series. Same with, John Hurt and Jonathan Carley as the War Doctor. I just think you've created this villain who is all about conflict, and he's almost a general. He's a general in a war, basically.
Well, he's
looking over everything.
He's literally a chief. He's
literally the War Chief. How have Big Finish?
Can I say one thing?
What is his game?
How have Big Finish not put him, or got the rights to the character and done a Time War series about him? Because I think I love the idea that the Time Lords recruit him to basically become a strategist in the battle, or even send him out into. There's so much wasted potential by just making him another Master. And again, I appreciate I may be in the majority there, but I really don't think that making him the Master is such a waste of a good underdeveloped character. That's my personal thoughts on it, at least anyway.
Can I bounce off that? Because I do agree with you, and I just want to say about this is an idea that I've just because the thing is that we know that Missy in Series 9 mentions about having a daughter, and we know about family ties with Time Lords. They were going to make the Doctor and the Master brothers at one point. In the expanded media, I'm pretty sure there's a nod that Braxiatel is the brother of the Doctor. I don't know if it's confirmed or if they're about
in Big Finish, and It's at least definitely in Big Finish. It's always been said that he was the Doctor's brother.
Okay, cool. So, we know about family ties. And the thing is that my theory is two things. The war chief as a character is very masterly, very masterly, very similar to the master. And I'd say I do agree with your idea of it being its own character, because I do agree that we need more Time Lords. You've got the first Doctor with the meddling monk, the second Doctor with the War Chief, and then it's just the Master onwards. And we get the Rani, but then that's pretty much it. You've got Chancellor, Favia, and all these people on Gallifrey. Let's get the Time Lords off Gallifrey. Like, can we get a spin-off show, please, of like all the Time Lords who survived the Master's desolation? But the thing is, moving back to the point, is that what if the War Chief is the Master's daughter? And then we know that Time Lords can change genders. It's just a male form of the Master's child. That's why they have like the easy inclinations, but they're not so the same. Why they say galactic peace as well, that's an explanation. They say galactic peace, and that can also be an explanation of why they have the Master's theme, because they're the offspring of the Master. That could be it. It doesn't have to be the same person, just the offspring, because we already know that the Master has had a child.
The only issue I can see with that is that we know that they were potentially schoolmates altogether.
Yeah, like they were part of a group called the Decker, which I mean that's the thing in the stuff I've been making for Prism and Overton Audios, Magnus is referenced by Michael Cox, who wrote the script. Magnus is referenced in that as well, so they are meant to be completely different people, at least in the original continuity.
I think that the bottom line is that this is one of these things that's going to be forever debated, and the War Games in colour is very much just another string to that bow, as it were, of debate. However, if you're interested to know more, please head over to my channel, Captain Jimmy Pie, where you can find under my brief history a rundown of the War Chief's various appearances, and you can decide for yourself what is or is not canon. But on that note.
Oh wait, no, I do have just one question, for everyone. As a quick answer, what do you think should be colorized next?
Oh, that is actually good.
Come on, Casper.
Oh,
Cyberman episode, because they done Daleks, they done this, and now they should really stop.
What about Tomb?
Tomb of the Cybermen would be a good choice for colorization, yes.
Yeah, Tomb.
Yeah.
There we go then. It's a big BBC. Get on it. Tomb of the Cybermen next.
Because I was
Casper
noting.
John has spoken.
Because I was noting how, if it is to be believed that the War Chief is the Master, then technically they've been doing firsts of Doctor Who history. And what I mean by first is the first Dalek story, and then they've done the first Time Lord / Master story, if that is to be believed. Either way, it's the first Time Lords story. And that's what I was wondering. First, would they do the 10th planet?
Oh, that's
If they're gonna jump back and forth, if they're gonna do first Doctor 1 year, second Doctor the next, then back to first.
Actually, yeah, I agree. Actually, sounds pretty good. I actually agree.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. I did also think War Games would be not War Games. What am I saying? War Games. Well, just talking about that. The War Machines.
Yes.
Because that has a lot of location shoots, and seeing the London streets colorized as we have. I think I saw a couple of colorization tests from.
Don't give me Polly in color. Don't do this to me.
Oh.
What?
Okay.
I love Polly. She is a queen.
Yeah, but then we'd have Dodo as well. Dodo very briefly again, and Hartnell.
Yay, Dodo.
But it's such a metropolitan story, the War Machines.
Yeah.
It would be a really good one to colorize, I think. But that's not my choice, sadly.
And on that note, let us know in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube. What would? Oh, sorry. Yes, no, you didn't.
Oh,
go, John. Go
quick.
I've actually stolen this off Matt Chambers. So Matt Chambers, this is actually your one, but he said the mind rubber, and I really agree.
Oh no, yes, fair enough. Yeah.
That's one of the TARDIS splits into pieces, isn't it?
Yeah. No, that's actually that's a fair point. That's a good choice.
I think a 4-parter would be safe, because a 4-parter is about the length that these seem to be going for. 25 minutes each. You end up with what, 1 hour? You end up with what, 100 minutes? So only having to cut 10 minutes sounds perfect, rather than what they had to do here, which was like cut hours.
Yeah.
But yes, indeed.
Right. Well, on that note, because we've definitely run on quite a bit here.
Yes.
Thank you all for joining us. If you are watching this on YouTube, please let us know in the comments what you think should be the next. What would you like to see colorized next?
Indeed.
Certainly interesting to hear others' opinions on that. But this has been another episode of the Dripping Hartnell Podcast. We have been discussing the war games in color. I have been your presenter, Jimmy Wolfe, and I have been joined by the lovely Abby Louise.
Hello, bye-bye.
Connor Chadwick, and John N. Harper.
And Casper
And
Casper John, our resident youthful opinion. I do not know off the top of my head what our next episode will be, but please tune in again to hear what we will be discussing next time. For now, we shall say, though, fare thee well, dear listener.
Bye-bye.
Bye.